Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Crossfire, which is episode 12 of season 4 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine one episode at a time. In this video I cover the 4th season episode Crossfire. So Crossfire is the episode in which First Minister Shakar comes to visit the station to do talks with the Federation about Bajor joining the Federation. However, a serious death threat is placed on his life by a Cardassian splinter group known as the True Way. So Odo has to be his bodyguard and his security and protect his security. The problem is Shakar starts to fall in love with Major Kira while Odo is around, and since Odo has a crush on Major Kira, this is very difficult for him, and he has problems coping with watching the woman he loves fall in love with another man. So eventually they're able to find the assassin. It happens off screen, so it doesn't matter, I guess, and Odo decides to just move on with his life and not ask Major Kira out, not tell her that he's in love with her. Instead, he decides to forget it and cuts off a little bit of contact with her to make it easier for himself. So, alright, first thing I'll say about this episode, well, I guess the first thing I should say is I don't think I watched the whole thing when I first saw it. I think it wasn't until years later that I watched it in its entirety. I do remember seeing the scene with Odo trashing his room and Quark coming down and complain. But I'll say this. So I remember the friend I used to hang out with all the time in 97, so I guess that's about a year, it was late 97, so it's like a year and a half after this. I mean, I hung out with him a little bit before then. So I'm not sure when he said it, but I remember telling him, maybe it was on TV or something, but I remember telling him that I hated this episode, that I hated the episode where Odo was being jealous of Kira, and he was like, why? He thought it was a really good episode because it gets into the, topic of unrequited love, and it's very emotional, and it's relatable. Now, if there's any topic that I should find relatable around this time in my life, it is unrequited love, because I was very much in love with my ex-girlfriend, who I was still good friends with, and so I should be able to relate to this episode, and it was around this time too, maybe a year before, a couple months before this episode came out. I had to watch her fall in love with another guy at my school because she went to school with me where we had small classes. I was in the class with her and the guy, and I could tell that they were flirting with each other, and it was very difficult for me. And plus the guy's an asshole. He used to hang out, I knew him from middle school, and he used to hang out with the people who bullied me. So, and plus he was just an asshole in general. He's just not a good guy. He was a dickhead. I used to call him Asshead, was my nickname for him. But anyway, so it was very difficult for me to watch them fall in love and start dating, and sure enough, he was an asshole to her. Ooh, shocker. And yeah, it was difficult for me to watch this and deal with it. And then a couple times we had, a little bit of a fling while she was still technically with him. But she wouldn't leave him for me, even though I begged her to. And eventually she did leave him, and we did get together, and that only lasted a couple months, and it ended horribly. But that's another story. The point is, I should be able to relate to it. And when my friend brought it up, he's like, no, this is a strong story about unrequited love. That actually made me doubt myself. I had to double check myself. I was like, oh, well, yeah, maybe he has a point, actually. Maybe that is a strong, topic. But when I did eventually, years later, and I think I was married by this time, but years later, I finally did watch this episode in its entirety. And then I could articulate better exactly why I didn't like it, despite the fact that it covers a topic that I should personally, and I do personally relate to. But the reason why I don't like it is because Odo is incredibly out of character. This whole episode is very out of character for Odo. I don't buy it for his character, quite frankly. And Quark is out of character. That scene in particular, because I pointed out that scene with Odo trashing his room and Quark coming by, because that's the scene I remember specifically and remember thinking, what the fuck show is this? This is not in character for either of these characters. This is completely out of character. And I don't buy it. I don't buy any of it. So, starting with Odo, yes, he has been shown to be in love with Major Kira. But he's worked with her for, at this stage, what? Is it 3 years? 3.5 years? And he's never acted like a giddy little teenager who's like, oh, do you like this belt? Like, none of that. He's always been professional. He's always had a strong friendship with her. But he's, like, in every scene of this episode, he acts like a giddy, like, oh, want your coffee? Ho, ho. And when she doesn't drink it, and she's like, oh, I'm good. I already had coffee with Shikari. He's, like, notably sad and, like, depressed. And how come he never acted like this before this episode? Huh? I'll tell you why. Because he's out of character in this episode. He absolutely 100% doesn't act like a giddy little teenager when he's around Kira. That began and ended with this episode. And that's why I don't buy it. That's why I don't think this is a good episode. I appreciate the effort to try to relate to me and not just me personally, but try to relate with people, which I'm sure is a lot of people, practically everyone who had to deal with this issue and how difficult it is, but is undermined by the fact that they're out of character. And because Odo had the deal, I mean, I think one of my Patreon comments is going to point out that Odo never behaved this way when Kira was around with Barial, so why is he all of a sudden behaving this way now, and why is he trashing his room like an angsty teenager? Like, that is something I did when I was 16, not when I was a fully grown man like Odo is supposed to be. And the thing with Quark, first of all, the whole thing about him complaining about the noise from Odo shape-shifting. They live in a fucking space station in space, so those walls should all be completely soundproof. I don't give a shit. I think it's dumb. Like, I know they try to Quark when, I think it was Kira asked, oh, you can hear that? And he points to his ears, is like, hello? No, sorry, I'm not buying it. They live in a fucking space station. The walls should already be soundproof. None of this bullshit where Odo has to soundproof it at the end. It should already be there. But anyway, regardless of that, though, that's not my biggest complaint. Obviously, my biggest complaint is he's also out of character. And I've noticed this. To be fair, it's not the only time this happens. I've been noticing a couple of times whenever Quark gives advice on dating, relationships, or being in love, and in this episode in particular, he's very sympathetic to Odo and the pain that he's going through. Now, of course, he hides it under a veneer of pretending like, oh, I don't give a shit about how you're feeling. I just hate the noise, and I want you to do good in the pool, because if you're doing a shitty job, then I'm gonna lose my pool about when you catch criminals. It's obvious that that's all an excuse. Just like when Odo obviously, wants to thank him for his sympathies, so he soundproofs the walls, and when Quark tries to say, oh, you're doing that for me, it's like, no, of course I'm not doing that for you. I'm just doing it to have to improve the things. It's just soundproofing it while I'm at it. But it's obvious that they're both sort of lying because they don't want to admit that they're actually trying to be kind to one another. But I don't particularly buy it. The whole thing with Quark giving relationship advice is totally out of character for him because he thinks women should be silent, should be naked, and should be subservient. In fact, there is a few times, like I believe there was an episode with Sisko, the one that's a very big step, and with Cassidy when he was having a fight, Quark was in character because he just said, oh, you humans, you treat your women as equal, just treat her like dirt and tell her what's what. That's Quark being in character. This is Quark being out of character by trying to, I know he has that veneer, but still what he's ultimately doing is trying to be sympathetic to Odo and be like, look, you need to move past it and you need to move beyond it and whatever. I don't buy it. I don't buy that Quark and Odo has that kind of relationship. So that whole scene, which is what really stuck in my mind, felt really, really inauthentic to me. And that's why I think I had that bad impression of the episode, and I was like, well, that episode sucks. I mean, there is the whole thing with Odo acting like a teenager for the rest of the episode, but I think it was that scene in particular, especially him destroying his room, just felt off. It felt like it was written by someone who didn't know anything about Deep Space Nine. Although we do know it's written by Renee Echevarria, who I usually like, but I think they kind of dropped the ball on this one. So as I was watching it, though, recently, I appreciate that they're getting back to Bajoran politics. It felt like an old blanket. It's something that like they used to do in season 2 with the Circle, and they had one episode about the Vipers or whatever in season 3, or I guess they had the shit with Bareil and Kai Wynn as well. But I felt like, well, there's obviously Shakaar too, so they did it a bit in season 3, but season 4 hadn't really touched on it, and it was good to see. Since they introduced Shakaar in season 3, it's good to see him as the actual first minister, that they're actually following up on that. But they don't actually do anything. The whole storyline about Shakaar negotiating with the Federation and the terrorist group putting threatening his life, all of that is just window dressing. All of that is just an excuse to have the plot with Odo acting like a teenager. That's it. It's just like the whole bullshit with the true way. Now, I think I watched a review of Arman Bashir where they said, oh yeah, we find this group called the True Way and we never see them ever again. And I think someone else will say the same thing about this episode. Like, oh, the first and only time. Actually, see them twice. Or they were mentioned. We don't actually see them. But they were mentioned in Arman Bashir because they were the ones who sabotaged the runabout and blew it up, and that's why the senior officers had to get beamed on board and get their holodeck images stored in the holodeck and become James Bond characters, villains mostly. So that was them, the True Way, and then they're mentioned here again. As the ones who want to assassinate Shakaar. So they are mentioned in 2 episodes, but they're so inconsequential, and in both episodes they're just a MacGuffin. They're just an excuse for the plot to happen. They don't actually care. They just want to create a threat. So let's introduce some radical Cardassian group and just never show them on screen, and then talk about them in 2 episodes and never mention them ever again. It's cheap. It's lazy writing, in my opinion. If you want to create an adversary, actually create an adversary. Actually have someone who's important. If you want to have this Cardassian splinter group, let's see them. Do something important with them. Don't just have them as the movers of the plot. Or not even the plot. It's just to create a threat, so you can have another storyline. Like, just have an excuse to have your James Bond holodeck episode, and have an excuse to have your Odo acting like a lovesick puppy episode. But it's just an excuse. It's lazy writing, in my humble opinion. And so, while I was excited to be like, oh, we get to see First Minister Shakar, and we get to get back into Bajoran politics, we don't, actually. Not really. It's just, the whole plot is just a BS excuse. And I don't like what they did with Shakar. I liked him in the first episode. But in this episode, he is all about, oh, what does Kira think about me? Do you think she's in love with me? And talking to Odo and being completely oblivious to the fact that he's obviously very hurt and emotionally affected by what he's saying. Oh, this will mean nothing to you, the stupid humanoid thing. And I was like, but Odo's being so obvious with his emotion. But anyway. And I believe, if I recall correctly, the only episode Shakar appears in after this is The Ascent, where they do the storyline with Kira giving birth to O'Brien's baby, and he's a total asshole in that episode. And I don't think we ever see him again after that. He's just mentioned. They were going to do a storyline in season 6 with something about Jake Sisko investigating Shakar and finding out a corruption scheme or something like that. And the writers rejected it, saying, oh, we're overdoing the Bajoran politics. You know, I wish they hadn't, because they shouldn't be overdoing Bajoran politics, because that's what the basis of the first 2 seasons is. I think it would be refreshing, actually, to get back into that, because, you know, the whole station is still Bajoran property. We still got Bajoran officers as our main characters, so you should do like a political thing. But, however, I can't complain too much, because that idea eventually turned into In the Pale Moonlight, which is one of the best episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise. So I would have rather they done both ideas, though, because they're totally different ideas. But that is just me. But anyway, Shakar did appear in the Star Trek novels, the DS9 novels that take place after the show finished. That's when Bajor actually did join the Federation, and I love that. I want to make that book canon just to spite Ira Stephen Bear. It pisses me off how Ira Stephen Bear is, oh, we're so proud of ourselves, we made it so Bajor never joined the Federation. Why the fuck not? That's the whole point of the show. They were supposed to try to join the Federation. I don't want to get into this, but Ira Stephen Bear does not understand what the Federation really stands for. I'll leave it at that, because that discussion is not really relevant here. But because this episode does show them setting up for the negotiations. In fact, Shakar says he's going to fast track Bajor joining the Federation, and this is addressed in season 5, of course, with the locusts. That paused that joining the Federation. But in the novels, with the Dominion War over, there's nothing stopping Bajor for joining the Federation, so they do, which they should. However, First Minister Shakar is taken over by those bluegill thingies from that TNG episode Conspiracy. Yes, the bluegills come back in the Deep Space Nine novels, and they try to take over the Federation. They take over First Minister Shakar, who has to be killed. So in those novels, he dies after he was taken over by a bluegill. You know, and I still really to me, I still consider those novels canon. I wish they were. I mean, they're not really, but they were good until they weren't. I think I talked about this before. There was different owners took over the novels, and then they went to shit, and they got all silly and dumb, and like promoted Ezra to a captain like really fast. And I was like, that's stupid. Oh, and they made like Ro the commander of Deep Space Nine or some shit. Yeah, I stopped reading it when that happened. Before that happened, so I don't even know. But they were really good before then. So for me, it's canon that Bajor joined the Federation and that Shakar was killed after he was taken over by Bluegill. But anyway, that's kind of off topic. So, oh yeah, and that Jim Hadar who like Odo sent to watch over Kira, like he was so cool, such a good character. But anyway, sorry, getting distracted. Because it's a lot more interesting than this episode. Oh, those novels are so much better than this shitty little episode where Odo acts like an angsty teenager. Yeah, I don't know if I really have anything else to say about this episode. It's, okay, so I will say the one thing I was relating to, that I could relate to, is Odo at the end, how he decides that he's not going to act on his feelings, so he tells Major Kira that he doesn't want to do those security meetings anymore because he used to like so look forward to them and thought they were awesome, and kind of had like a very distant, sort of rigid stance with her, kind of like, I'm gonna only be around here for work. If it's necessary, I'm gonna keep her at a distance because it's how he has to cope with his feelings. And that is something I totally can understand and relate to, because eventually that aforementioned relationship I was just talking about, eventually I had, even though we were still friends, I basically stopped talking to her. And, you know, she could have called me if she wanted to, but she didn't. That wasn't really her style. She was a bit of a recluse, a little bit. But no, it was emotionally, like, I made a decision, like, just to stop contacting her. It's just, we talked one day on the phone, and she was being very sort of distant, like, why do we even talk, and shit like that. And, you know, it was like, this relationship is unhealthy, even as friends. I think it's better for probably both of us if we just stop talking to each other. And so I just stopped talking to her, haven't talked to her since, and have no idea whatever happened to her. I mean, I wish I'd known that. Like, but again, she's not one to go on Facebook or anything like that. So I'm sure she's still alive. That's what I really like to think. But it also is true of, again, not getting too much into my personal life, but it was also true of when I was divorced, that it was healthier for me. Like, my ex-wife wanted to remain friends, and I was like, I have nothing against you, but I can't be your friend. And it was, if anything, it was just for my mental state, my own mental health, and I tried to explain that, and it was mentally healthy for me to try to avoid her. Now, we did try to have a go at friendship a bit later, but that's, again, another story, and I'm not going to get too much into the personal aspect of it. The point is, I could relate to this ending. I could relate to safeguard your feelings by keeping your love interest who's unrequited love, who doesn't love you back and is not going to return your feelings. Try to avoid her and keep her at arm's length. I could totally relate to that. So that is something I could relate to in this episode, even if, and there's other things, like I could relate to the feelings of frustration that Odo has to go through, as I said, with my personal experience of having to watch the woman you love fall in love with someone else, and how fucking painful and agonizing it is. So I can relate to this episode, but I won't forgive her for the fact that that Odo is completely and utterly out of character. I can't overlook that. So anyway, I would now like to thank all those who support me on Patreon. It is very much appreciated. It does help me continue with my channel. I want to give a big special thanks to Brandon Neal Howells and Jordan Johnson. Thank you both for your very strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Antarius, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Lavals, Alessandro Migalacio, sorry, going slowly, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we do have a few Patreon comments for this episode. First comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, "Did I light the candle and did I go to the house?" So Shakar returned, now officially First Minister, and needs the bodyguard Odo to protect him. And Kira will always love the boy toy. Meanwhile, the only part that I consider salvageable is Odo conveying his unrequited love, the moments with Quark, and the definite signs, at least at this point in the overall DS9 narrative, of Kira not really noticing Odo's interest. And yes, Odo's decision to try to detach from Kira from what she saw was a close friendship was striking, but it's not like we really see the two become more distant or Odo yet more detached in the end. So even the ending feels weak to me, like I never bought it. Meanwhile, starting in this episode, Shakar quickly becomes less interesting than Bareil, perhaps victim of the Kira boy toy curse. Just not nuts about this episode and always on my skip list, even though I can hear loudly that for an overall narrative you can't. Well, I guess the same can be said for episodes like Prophet and Lace, or even Let He Who Is Without Sin, but that doesn't mean I feel I have to watch them or tell people to watch them. I'd rather give a little plot synopsis and tell them to move on. I'll give it 2.5 yawns coming from me as I fall asleep to this out of 10. When you mentioned that Odo was the bodyguard, I thought you were going to say, "And I will always love you." Anyway, sorry. I guess he'd be singing that to Shakar, because Shakar is who he's the bodyguard for. But anyway, yeah, that's funny, because it is true that Kira's boyfriends are always, as soon as she starts dating them, they become uninteresting. Didn't happen to Odo, though. But yeah, definitely it happened with Bareil, and it happened with, because Bareil was a good character until he started dating Kira, and Shakar was an interesting character until he started dating Kira. It's like, yeah, it's the curse. Yeah, and the thing is that the Odo and Kira relationship, when it starts to spark up at the end of season 5, when, you know, future Odo admits that he's in love with Kira and she finds out, and then the relationship is kind of awkward, and then Odo betrays her during the Dominion takeover, and the relationship is more awkward. Then they kind of make up, but then they eventually start dating. Like, all that is way more interesting and done much, much better than this episode, and more in character for both those characters. So this episode kind of feels like a real miss, like a real misstep, I think I should say. Anyway, next comment is from Kyrie091, who says, "Crossfire, more like tossing the fire." I don't know. There are probably better puns than this. I'm tired today. I promise I'll do better next time. I actually like tossing the fire. I think that's a good one. I think that's one of your better ones. Anyway, next comment is from Benjamin Mead, who says, This is one I really dislike. Mopey Odo, boring Shakar, and faceless terrorist nothings. The best part about this episode is Quark's onesie. Oh yeah, his onesie. Didn't even notice that. But yeah. Dull episode indeed. Next comment is from Antarius, who says, the title of this episode didn't ring a bell, so I read a synopsis and quickly decided not to watch this episode. Judging by the synopsis and the very vague memories it brought back, I will give it 2 out of 10. Wow, there's a lot of that. All the comments, except for maybe Norman's, are really short for this episode. Oh no, Brandon's going to have a longer one later too. But yeah, most people were just like really short. They don't really have much to say about this episode, which is not too surprising because it is a dull and forgettable episode. And yeah, I don't blame you at all for skipping this one. Anyway, next comment is from Ricky, who says, this episode was forgettable. Odo moping around and smashing his place when he sees Kira and Shakar together, to me, seems out of character, and he never did this when Bareil was alive, and yet he does it here. And then in season 5, he has a one-off romance with a woman, not even thinking about Kira, so this episode was a wash for me, so my rating is a 4 out of 10. Now, to be fair, his little romance with what's-her-face, Orion Syndicate woman, who's the same woman who drugged Archer in that Ryza episode. But anyway, same actress. She's also the same actress that was flirting with Geordi in the Masterpiece Society. But anyway, I can buy Odo's relationship with her because there was kind of the rebound. That's kind of the distraction. He's trying to distract himself from Kira, and I've been there too, absolutely. So I can actually buy that, but I totally agree with you about this episode being forgettable. And Odo being out of character 100%. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, the bodyguard meets misery. Odo acts like a teenager when he realizes his crush gets into a relationship with the ghost from the candle. He didn't seem to mind when Kira played racquetball with Vedic Bareil, wink wink. So my rating is 4. Worf always seems to be an earthhole when he is being nice. He is out of character. He was that way with Cedo. I think he played that blindfold game in her quarters out of 10. Alright, so just for context, I believe this comment was written right after I released my review for Starship Down, and in that episode, in that review for that episode, I complained that Worf was totally out of character because he was treating the junior officers like shit and didn't know how to relate to them. And I could be wrong, but I think this is kind of a rebuttal to that, saying that Worf is always an asshole even to Cedo. Yes, but here's the thing. I think the way he treated Cedo showed that he knew how to react with junior officers, because yes, he did that bullshit with the blindfold, but he did that to teach her. It was tough love. He did that to teach her a lesson, and then he was like her mentor, and he was like very sad when she died, and he was very supportive of her. So no, I gotta totally disagree with you if that's your thing. If this is what you're implying, I think you're wrong. Totally disagree with you there. And plus, yes, Worf can be an earthhole sometimes, but he knows how to treat junior officers as the few episodes, the times where we get Worf being a total asshole to a subordinate is when something's wrong. I think it was Rightful Heir or something. We start yelling at this ensign for no good reason. They could tell something was off because that's not how he normally is, because he normally knows how to treat junior officers. So no, he was totally out of character in Starship Down. I am doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on that. But Anyway, you mentioned the bodyguard again, and okay, sorry. Next comment. Next comment is from Brandon Neal Howes, who said, at first, I got this confused with the Mirror Universe episode with the similar name. Alas, it is just Odo the angsty teen in love with Kieran Nerys, who for some unfathomable reason has fallen for Shakar, who has all the personality of a wet paper bag. The same actor was the Candle Ghost in Sub Rosa, so my expectations were not very high to begin with. Since becoming the first minister of Bajor in this episode named after him, Shakar has come to Deep Space Nine to help negotiate Bajor's admittance into the Federation, only to discover there will be an assassination attempt on him by a Cardassian group called The True Way, who only appear in this episode. This episode is silly. Shakar has no regard for his own safety and decides to divert from the assigned route. But the silliest part is Odo not asking for the security codes. I watched the turbolift plummet for an intermittent time before muttering, "Change shape, you stupid fuckwit." I don't want to dwell on Odo's temper tantrum or Quark's insights. Suffice to say that the scene between Worf and Odo wanting to be left alone is comedy gold. 3 Ferengi listening devices out of 10. Yeah, I do like the Ferengi listening device, how he... I do, and this is showing Odo being in a bad mood, how he was like, went to hand it back to Quark and dropped it in the punch or whatever. And he was like, oh, how clumsy of me. That was funny. I did like that. And it was portraying that Odo was like in a worse mood than normal, and that he was being a bit of a dick because of it. Yeah, I did like the scene with Odo and Worf, although I will say that did feel kind of a little bit out of character that they would be talking to each other in that manner, but whatever, it's fine. I think as a introvert myself, I can relate to the whole thing about don't make them feel welcome. It was kind of funny, and that's something Odo and Worf would have in common. So I did appreciate that. Now, the True Way, as I mentioned, do appear in Our Man Bashir, but I can't blame anyone for not remembering that because they're so inconsequential and they're just a plot device and they don't really... It's just lazy writing. It's funny because you said you got the title mixed up with... Crossover is the Mirror Universe episode you're thinking of. But for me, I get this episode mixed up with Cold Fire. Because it's Crossfire, Cold Fire. 2 Fire episodes that came out not that far apart because I did not that long ago reviewed Crossfire. Or not, this is Crossfire. Cold Fire. See? I get them mixed up. It was like, yeah. I was like, I'm going to watch Cold Fire. And I'm like, no, actually, it's Crossfire. Cold Fire is the Cass episode. But anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So, my rating for Crossfire... See, I almost said Cold Fire again. My rating for Crossfire out of 10 is a 4. Poor. I'm thinking of, honestly, like, I used to consider this for my top 10 worst. I don't think I ever put it in my top 10 worst, but I would consider it for it. But I'm going to go as high as 4 because I can relate to what they're trying to do. And I can relate to how agonizing it is to watch the woman you love fall in love with someone else right in front of you and being forced to see it like up front like Odo is. And I can relate to Odo's decision to cut things off at the end as a really healthy decision. Problem is, this episode is completely out of character for Odo. It's like character assassination. I don't know if I chose this for character assassination for Odo, but it pretty much is. And Quark is out of character too. I don't buy their friendship. I don't buy the fact that Quark would give relationship advice. I don't buy the fact that the walls aren't soundproof. And the whole bullshit with the true way and the assassination attempt. It's resolved off screen. Like, Odo is, like, in his quarters moping or something, and Worf, like, catches him off screen. It's like, oh, yeah, by the way, we caught this assassin, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter. Assassin kind of sucked because the only reason that he almost succeeded is because Odo fucked up at his job because he wasn't paying attention. So that whole... And nobody gives a shit about the true way. Nobody gives a shit about it. And Shakar is not an interesting character, and all the stuff was just window dressing so they could have Odo moping around, which is, as I said, 100% out of character for him. So, not surprised so many people didn't have much to say about it, and a lot of people referred to it as a forgettable episode that makes total complete sense to me. In fact, I think this is a very forgettable episode. I often forget it exists until I see it on the episode list, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's that episode when Odo was moping around like an angsty teenager. Forgot about that one. So, so yeah, 4, and I think that's very generous giving it a 4, but 4 out of 10 for me. So that is it for my review of Crossfire. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to help out the channel, leave a like, a comment, subscribe, all that sort of things would help me out. And if you really want to help me out, you could support me on Patreon. There's a link to that in the description below. Different tiers for different rewards, such as read your comments in my videos, and I have Patreon-only videos exclusively for Patreon supporters where I revisit reviews that I've done and pre-releases, stuff like that you can check out if you're so inclined to do so. And you can also check me out in the description below. There's also links to my Facebook page and my Blue Sky page. There you can leave comments, shorter comments, but short comments that I will read in my videos if you want to as well, and just check it out for, you know, memes or funny shit or opinions on random stuff if you're interested in doing that. So anyway, let's see what's coming up on the channel. Thursday will be my review for Season 3, Episode 8 of Strange New Worlds. And Saturday, I'll be doing one of those aforementioned patron-exclusive episodes over on Patreon, revisiting my review for the masterpiece known as Threshold. And then next Monday, back to DS9 on my main channel, reviewing the episode Return to Grace. Your Grace. Anyway, be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover Star Trek DS9, Star Trek Voyager, and Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and many other videos on Star Trek and other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.